Next, we're going to be talking about asystole and PEA, which is pulseless electrical activity. So when we start with asystole, it's really a pretty easy rhythm to get the hang of because there's just nothing there. There's no electrical activity within the conduction system. On occasion, you might have a random P wave, or you might see a QRS beat just escape here or there. It's still considered asystole. It's basically going to look like a flat line on the ECG paper. It's very rarely completely flat. There's always just a little bit of slight movement through it, but it is basically no waveforms, no QRSs, no P waves, and it's also known as ventricular standstill. So when we're looking at this rhythm, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next screen here. So on this top screen here, on this top rhythm, it's showing you in 6 seconds, I have nothing. I have no P waves. I have no QRSs. I have no waveforms. Now you'll notice that the flat line doesn't look completely 100% flat. It does almost appear like it has a slight wave to it. That's pretty typical with asystole, but there's nothing to count. There's no rate. There's just nothing there. The heart is not beating at all. There's no electrical current going through the heart at all. On this example here, now this is marked for 2 3-second hash marks, though it looks almost a little longer than that. Let's just look at this whole strip as a 6-second strip. You'll notice that it looks like I have a flat line here, and then I have just one intermittent complex, QRS complex. It's very random. Those, a lot of times, we just refer to that as an agonal beat. It's just one last dying beat that pops up every now and then from the ventricle, but it's not enough to perfuse anything or to sustain anything, so we still look at it as asystole. This top strip here, same thing, in 6 seconds. You can see I have no beats, no P waves, no QRSs, no waveforms of any kind. So we're going to refer to that as asystole. Again, it can also be called ventricular standstill. And it basically means there is nothing left of the heart. Here's another example here in this bottom one. Again, in 6 seconds, you can see that even though it's not 100% flat, there is really just nothing there. But one thing I will mention, so when you do see these little bits of a waveform here, it is worth putting this rhythm in another lead. So when you do have asystole, and let's say you're monitoring them in lead 2, we are going to put them in another lead just to confirm it. Because if you remember in some of the past rhythms that we've learned when I've shown you 12 leads of them, sometimes in some leads it may look flat, and in other leads it might look like I have a really fine V-fib. And if I have a fine V-fib, I'll treat it as V-fib and I'll defibrillate it, where with asystole we would not do that. So it is worth putting it in another lead to just double check. What causes asystoles? It's usually a terminal rhythm following ventricular fibrillation, ventricular tachycardia, or idioventricular rhythm. It may be caused by acidosis, hypoxia, hyperkalemia, drug overdoses, long hypothermia. But our cardiac output, there's nothing there. There's no pulse, there's no breathing. And the thing with asystole is it has very, very poor prognosis, even if it's witnessed, even if you caught it right away. When we learned about ventricular fibrillation, we learned that the earlier we defibrillate someone, the best chance of survival they're going to have. With asystole, even if it's witnessed, survival rates with asystole are only 7 to 10%, even if it's witnessed. So we have very poor prognoses, even with prompt treatment with this rhythm. So our treatment is going to be CPR. We're going to get good CPR going. We're going to make sure we have that backboard underneath our patient to make our compressions the most effective. We're going to be doing our 30 compressions to 2 breaths. Whether we're doing 1 person or 2 person for an adult, we're going to make sure we do full chest recoil and we're pressing at least 2 inches in depth. We're going to get that IV going as soon as we possibly can. And our IV can be an IV or an IO, an intraosseous, whatever we can get in quickest. And as soon as we get IV access, and with IVs, with our codes, we always want to hang normal saline or lactated ringers. We don't want to use glucose-based solutions. You don't want to ever give too much glucose in a resuscitation attempt. It will make it actually a little harder for them to respond to treatment. As soon as we get our IV or IO in, we want to give epinephrine. And with epinephrine, it's 1 milligram. It can be given every 3 to 5 minutes throughout our entire code. There's no max dose on it. We do not defibrillate asystole. So if you remember from VFib and VTAC, when we defibrillate someone, we are doing a massive depolarization of the heart, trying to stop all that chaotic electrical activity, hoping the normal pattern will kick back in. With this, there is nothing to stop. It's already stopped. There just wasn't anything left to kick back in. So our only hope for this is if there's a treatable cause that we can fix. Sometimes if you have a treatable cause, it's possible we can get the person back. So we start running through what we call our H's and our T's. So one of our H's is hypovolemia. If you have reason to suspect it, you think they were dehydrated for some reason, they were bleeding, they came back from the cath lab, they had surgery, they were in a car accident, any reason to suspect that they might be hypovolemic, we'll give them volume. And in this type of situation, ACLS is going to recommend that you just go ahead and do large volume, normal saline or LR. You can even give 1 liter at a time, 1 or 2 liters at a time. Okay, of normal saline if you think this is what's causing it. Hypoxia. If you think oxygen, if we're doing CPR, we're at least doing a bag mask valve system, so we should be giving 100% oxygenation that way. But we are going to think about intubation right away, putting an advanced airway in and protecting that airway to make sure we're getting the full amount of oxygenation in there that we can. Hypothermia. If they are hypothermic and they're in asystole, we have to warm them up. So we're going to do warm IV solutions, warm blankets, the electronic blankets, the warm bear huggers that we have. And we're going to try to get the core body temperature warmed up before we decide that we're done. Hypo or hyperkalemia, we would try to correct. Hydrogen ion acidosis, we can give blood gases and we can give bicarb if needed. Toxins. Did they take something? And if they did take a toxin or some type of drug overdose, can we figure out what it is, and is there a reversal agent for it? Maybe that will help. If we have reason to suspect a tamponade, they'll do a pericardial centesis. And if they think there's a tension pneumothorax, they'll do a needle decompression. So our hope for this is the only way that we're probably ever going to get someone back from asystole is if they have a treatable cause that we can take care of in a timely manner. The other thing we want to think about is support for our family members. This has a very poor prognosis, and family members, they need to know what's going on. And it's actually recommended that you allow the family to be in on a code if that is a possibility. Because they see everything that we're doing, they see what's going on, and they know that we've tried everything and that everything possible has been attempted. They have found with multiple studies that when family members are allowed to be present in the code, and they can't be left by themselves, and if they're getting hysterical, of course, we're going to have to take them out. But if we have a nurse or social services that we can assign to them to kind of explain what's going on and try to help them deal with it, they have found that people that are allowed to be in the code frequently do better in the grieving process. They start going through the grieving process a little bit easier. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about in this section is pulseless electrical activity, PEA. And this is the presence of electrical activity that should produce a pulse, but it's not. So it can be any normal looking rhythm. I can have something that looks like this. I have a regular rhythm. I have a P wave for each and every QRS. I have normal PR intervals, normal QRS intervals. I have a normal sinus rhythm. But I go check my patient and my patient is dead. There's no heartbeat. There's no breathing. So this would be PEA. It could be something like this top one here. Regular rhythm. My rate is 50. I have an inverted P wave with a short PR interval, normal QRS size. I have a junctional rhythm. But if I go check my patient and there's no pulse, there's no breathing, then I have PEA. Pulseless electrical activity. I have a rhythm that should be producing a pulse, but it's not. We used to refer to it as EMD, electrical mechanical dissociation, but the more correct terminology is PEA. This middle example here, again, I have a regular rhythm. My rate here is 30. I have a sinus P wave. Now it looks like I have a wide QRS, but I've got that sinus P wave in front of it. So this would be a sinus bradycardia with a bundle branch block. But you go check your patient, there's no pulse, there's no breathing. It is now PEA. This one here, regular rhythm. My rate here looks like it's about 120. I have a P wave for each and every QRS. Normal PR interval. So since it had a normal P wave and normal QRS, we were expecting it to have a pulse, but it didn't. It would be PEA. Now the causes of our PEA, it is not an electrical problem. It is a pump problem. There's something keeping the heart from pumping. So the most common cause of this is a hypovolemia. If you have blood loss, you have severe dehydration, you've had a car accident, a surgical procedure, and there's no volume coming back into the heart, it's not going to stretch. Your myocardial cells are not going to stretch for you to have that good contractility for it to come back and contract and give you a decent stroke volume. With PEA, there is no cardiac output. Your patient is pulseless and apneic. So you may be looking at a perfectly normal sinus rhythm up on the screen, but you go check your patient and they're dead. We're going to start CPR. We're going to get that backboard underneath them. We're going to do good compressions, 30 compressions to 2 breaths for an adult, for 1 person and 2 person. We're going to do good chest recoil. We're going to be pressing at least 2 inches in depth. And then we want to get our IV or our IO access right away. We're going to give epinephrine. Epinephrine, we give 1 milligram every 3 to 5 minutes. For our entire code, we can give it. Now, vasopressin is another type of pressor, very similar to epinephrine. And vasopressin used to be used a lot. We would give epinephrine or we could give vasopressin 40 units. Lately, AHA's guidelines say that you can use vasopressin, but usually we just recommend epinephrine, and that's generally what you will see in practice. We do not defibrillate this rhythm. Remember, when we defibrillate someone, we're trying to take chaotic, disorganized rhythm, stop it, hoping a normal pattern will kick back in. We already have a normal pattern here. It's just not perfusing. So we have to find and treat the cause. This has a better survival rate than asystole does, so long as you can find and treat the cause. So we're going to be looking for hypovolemia. If we think it, we'll give them volume. Hypoxia, well, we'll probably have intubated him by this point, and we'll be giving him 100% oxygenation. Hydrogen ion acidosis, we're going to get some blood gases and give him bicarb if needed. Hypo or hyperkalemia, we can address. Hypothermia, we need to warm them up. If they took a toxin, we want to know what it is, if there's any antidote for it or reversal agent. If we're suspecting tamponade, we can do a pericardial centesis. Tension pneumothorax, they'll do a needle decompression. Thrombosis, they can go straight to the cath lab. And then, of course, trauma, we would address any trauma issues. If there is an easily treatable cause, there is actually a pretty good survival rate with PEA, unlike asystole. But if you don't have something that you can find and treat the cause, then we're really going to be struggling with this, and we're going to be really limited with treatment. So that's going to end our session for asystole and PEA.